Welcome back. It is Saturday. I am breaking down my running back rankings tier list, going through my top 36, the injuries, all the stuff that you guys need to know to set your fantasy football lineups at the running back position. A reminder, this will be the last video you guys ever see of me in this background because I am moving on Sunday, which means Danny will be live solo on Sunday while I am moving. But let's get right into the tier list. Let's not waste any time, starting with the players who are injured right now, guys that we got to break down from an injury perspective that affect the rankings. We have Isaiah Pacheco, J.K. Dobbins, Austin Eckler, Tajay Spears, and then the two Raiders running backs. Of course, since there's already been 4 games played, 3 on Thanksgiving and 1 on Friday for Black Friday, this video will be a little bit shorter. I'll kind of just break down where I had those guys ranked. Of course, they did lock into my rankings, so I obviously can't move them due to hindsight where they actually finished. But Isaiah Pacheco, he did play already on Friday. He had 6.4 PPR points. Good kind of get your feet wet game coming off of the major injury for him. I'm confident he'll be the lead back going forward, but I did actually rank him outside of my top 36 going into the week. He locked in for me at 37 because I really didn't know what to expect out of Pacheco. I wasn't super bullish and just like ready to throw him into my lineup right away. And same goes for Kareem Hunt. I thought they both kind of cannibalized each other, and that's what ended up playing out. J.K. Dobbins was ruled out with a knee injury. It is reported that he's expected to miss some time. I don't know how long that's going to be. He hasn't been placed on IR or anything. It's possible he's only out like a game or two, but the Gus Bus will be leaving the station. You guys will definitely hear me talk about him in the top 36. Austin Eckler has been ruled out with a concussion, and Brian Robinson is expected to play. He has not actually listed on the injury report. He was a full participant in Friday's practice, so he should be alone in that backfield for the first time all season. Tajay Spears missed last week with a concussion. He is a full participant the last 2 days, but he is still in the concussion protocol by the sounds of it, so he is questionable as of now. Maybe when you guys are hearing this, he's cleared the protocol, but it's 8:49 a.m. Eastern right now, and he has not cleared the protocol yet, so it's actually not looking too good for him to play, and of course, that is a big-time upgrade for Tony Pollard managers. And then Alexander Mattison, Zamir White both did not play on Friday, so we saw Amir Abdullah be the lead back yet again. So let's get into the locked-in running back starts, running backs 1 through 12. A reminder, there's no bye weeks this week, so there is a lot of good running back plays. You shouldn't have to dig too deep to be able to start some good running backs this week. All of these top guys are in your lineup as far as who could overperform, underperform, and who's in good game environments. I'll break that down here. So elite running backs who have really good matchups this week. We have Joe Mixon versus the 31st ranked Jacksonville Jaguars, Christian McCaffrey versus the Bills, Kyron Williams versus the Saints, Josh Jacobs versus the Dolphins, who we saw play already, Jahmyr Gibbs versus the Bears, who we saw play already. He ended up fumbling and kind of getting benched after that, which is unfortunate. Chase Brown versus the Steelers, and James Cook versus the 49ers. These guys, all very good options this week. Of course, some of them already played, but they were really good plays at the time. Elite running backs who are projected to be in high-scoring games. We have Derrick Henry and Saquon in that Ravens and Eagles game, is the highest over-under of 51 on the slate. Kyron Williams and Kamara both playing against each other. That game is a 49-point over-under. Jahmyr Gibbs versus the Lions. That game had a pretty high over-under, but like I said, unfortunately, he did end up fumbling and kind of getting benched after that. Bijan versus the Chargers. That game has a pretty high over-under of 48. Chase Brown versus the Steelers, 47. And then Achane and Jacobs, who played on Thursday night, that game had a 47-point over-under. We saw both of them have really good performances as well, so good news for them. And then elite running backs who are in bad matchups, so just kind of maybe temper expectations around these guys, because these are probably the horses of your fantasy lineups. Maybe make other plans and try and maybe get some more upside in other areas. Bijan versus the Chargers is not an easy matchup efficiency-wise for him on the ground, but like I said, the game is expected to be high scoring. Same goes for Derrick Henry versus the Eagles, and Alvin Kamara versus the Rams, and Saquon Barkley versus the Ravens. Devon Achane, of course, we already saw play. His matchup was a little bit more close to league average, but it was technically a below average matchup by 1 spot there against the Packers. So not much to report from like a usage standpoint. I'm not really going to go through and break down usage at this point in the season. We kind of know what all of these top running backs have been doing. We know exactly what their workloads have been looking like. So let's get right into the high-end RB2s. And again, this will be me kind of telling you how I would start these guys. So if I have somebody ranked RB13 and you're deciding between RB16 and RB13, you should play the guy who I have ranked RB13. So speaking of RB13, that is Breece Hall, running back of the New York Jets, playing against the Seattle Seahawks, 17th ranked against the fantasy football running back position. This is the only time all year that I've had Breece Hall outside of RB1 range. The reason for that is because he is dealing with a knee injury. He did not practice on Wednesday. It was reported on Wednesday that he might actually miss this game. It looks like he's probably going to end up playing. He did practice in a limited capacity on Thursday and then was a full participant on Friday. So I'm not really worried that he's not going to play. Otherwise, I would have talked about him in the injury section. But I do worry that maybe he's not 100% his full workload, 70-80% of the snaps, most of the carries, so on and so forth. Maybe we see Braylon Allen get a little bit more work than usual, which is why I have him a little bit lower. So the over-under of this game, just 41.5 points. The under is actually catching some steam. Plus, as we know, the New York Jets are just kind of a train wreck on offense, and the Seahawks have been a little bit tighter on the defensive side of the ball. Of course, before the bye, we saw Breece Hall just have like a monster game, 31.1 PPR points, but I am tempering expectations just a little bit. I'm still starting him. Obviously, if you have him, you're starting him, but I do worry a little bit that he's going to have a bit of a down performance. So I have him at RB13, which is the lowest he's been ranked for me on any single week all season long. Running back 14 for me is David Montgomery versus the Chicago Bears. Of course, he already played. He scored. He had a solid day after Gibbs was benched for fumbling. Obviously, I couldn't have known that Gibbs was going to fumble, but 15.4 PPR points from David Montgomery will likely put him around the RB14 finish on the week when it's all said and done and everything and everyone has played. So David Montgomery, pretty good performance there. Running back 15 for me is Bucky Irving versus the Carolina Panthers. He absolutely rocket ships his way all the way up into a top 15 play. We saw what he did last week. He had a monster game. Carolina is absolutely trash against the run. They're dead last in DVOA. They're dead last in adjusted fantasy points allowed to running backs. And for the first time this season, we saw Bucky Irving actually outsnap Rachaad White, post-bye rookie bump, potentially. That's what maybe happened there. The coaches got back. They looked at the tape. They realized that Bucky Irving was the better running back. Now, I can't imagine he's going to get much more work than what we saw from him last week. He had 12 carries, 6 targets, but honestly, that's like the perfect workload for Bucky Irving. That is the absolute sweet spot because we got to remember, Bucky Irving is not 5'11" and 220 pounds. He's an undersized running back. So think of how the Lions deploy Jahmyr Gibbs, who's an undersized running back, or Devon Achane with the Dolphins, who's an undersized running back. If Bucky Irving can get that workload all season long and into next season as well, then I feel really, really good about Bucky Irving's fantasy prospects going forward. And I actually like him to go higher than his rushing plus receiving yards over on Underdog. We're going to be building out a short pick'em entry here in a second, but he's been beyond this total in 2 straight games, and I feel really good against Carolina that he can have a monster performance. Like we said, we saw him put 27.1 PPR points up last week, and I feel really good about him having another like 15-plus point game. Running back 16 for me is Jonathan Taylor versus the New England Patriots. They're 23rd against the run. To me, it's absolutely astonishing how much of a workhorse JT is, and the fact that he's like not been that good. Like if you look the last 2 games, he's been over 90% of the snaps, which is like astonishing Kyron Williams level workload, and he had 3.5 PPR points and 7 PPR points the last 2 games. Having 96% of the snaps and 3.5 PPR points is like Trey Sermon bad last week. At least we had a terrible matchup for him. It was the Detroit Lions. They're very good against stopping the running back position, and this one is a much more favorable matchup versus the New England Patriots. They're bottom 12 against the run. The Colts are actually favored here too by 2.5 points versus last week they were going up against the best team in the NFL, and they were on the road, and the Lions just absolutely beat the crap out of them. So I feel better about the Colts this week. I think this could be the get-right game for Jonathan Taylor. I would love to rank him higher, but a high-end RB2 is kind of what he's been all year, so that's where I have him ranked right now. I like him to go higher than his longest rush of 14.5 yards. I think if the Colts get up big, it's going to be difficult to tackle Jonathan Taylor in the second half of this game, so I like him to maybe scamper down for a long run in this one. So like I said, I think this could be a big-time get-right game for Jonathan Taylor, but I'm not going to go overboard and rank him as like a top 10 running back until he actually proves it, because he just hasn't been as good as we wanted him to be so far this season. So running back 17 for me is Aaron Jones versus the Arizona Cardinals. After 2 weeks of banged up kind of production of Aaron Jones, we didn't really see him command a full workload in week 10. In week 11, he was also in and out of like the medical 10 in some of those games. We saw him bounce back in a big way in week 12. We saw 21.9 PPR points, a top 5 week, 25 opportunities, 78% of the snaps, 58% of the routes. This was the Aaron Jones we saw early on in the season, which looked like he was going to end up being a league winner. Has another good spot on the docket here too. The Arizona Cardinals are 20th against fantasy running backs. It's a 45-point over-under. The Minnesota Vikings are at home for this game, and he's exceeded the yardage total that Underdog has set for him here in every single game this season. except for week 11 when he was in and out of the lineup in the medical 10, and also except for the London game. So I feel really good about Aaron Jones to go higher than 87.5 rushing yards, and that's actually going to complete the pick'em entry that we're going to build out in today's video. Again, if you guys want to tail that, you can get the link down below, down in the description and in the pinned comment. Promo code FSE over on Underdog Fantasy. They have tons of Feast Week promos going on right now. For those of you guys that are NBA fans, NHL fans, they got boosts going in the pick'em lobby right now. And of course, when you sign up, you get this free square by using the promo code FSE, and you also get up to 1,000 in bonus cash if you want to tail this entry. So if you want to tail it, that is linked down below in the pinned comment. But moving into my running back 18, closing out this tier, we have Kenneth Walker versus the New York Jets. Kenneth Walker has been quiet as of late. He's played some tough matchups. Seahawks offensive line not been playing super well. But I do think the Jets are a great bounce back kind of get right spot for any offense looking, to get right, because the Jets are at a point in their season where, the coach has been fired, the quarterback is unhappy, the interim coach is not doing a good job. If there's anything we know about the New York Jets, it's that they're kind of quitters, and they're going to have disappointing 3-and-outs and stupid turnovers, and the opponent's going to win most of the games against the New York Jets. So if the Seahawks, who are 2-point road favorites, can control this game, and honestly, I'd probably take the Seahawks -2 if I were betting this one, I think we will see some business decisions in the second half, and maybe Kenneth Walker's able to get right, break a long touchdown. We haven't really seen that from him since really, really early on in the season, and I do think this could be a good get right spot for Kenneth Walker. So low-end running back 2s here. We have Chuba Hubbard versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They are exactly league average against the run. We saw Jonathan Brooks back, or make his NFL debut in week 12, and it really didn't matter, honestly. Chuba Hubbard was still the workhorse in this backfield. 88% of the snaps, 89% of the carries, still getting a large percentage of the routes. Of course, all the inside the 5 work. It amounted to like 5 snaps that Jonathan Brooks played. And again, Chuba Hubbard having a top 15 week against the Kansas City Chiefs, who are like literally the best run defense in the NFL, is extremely impressive. And like I said, the Buccaneers are not nearly as good as the Chiefs on defense at stopping the run. So until I actually see Chuba Hubbard not command more than like 70% of the snaps, I'm going to continue ranking him this high. Until Jonathan Brooks actually makes a sizable dent tangibly in his workload, he's going to continue being ranked as a solid, high-end RB2 for me. So I like Chuba Hubbard a lot this week. Running back 20 for me is Tony Pollard versus the Washington Commanders. They are 21st against fantasy running backs in adjusted points allowed. Tony Pollard is a great play yet again because, like I said in the injury section, we don't know if Tajay Spears is going to play. Unfortunately, when he was playing in week 10 and in week 11, we saw Tony Pollard get a lot less of a workload than we saw from him in week 8, week 9, and week 12 when Tajay Spears was out of the lineup. So if Spears, who has practiced in a full participation, like I said, for the last 2 days in a row, but still hasn't cleared the concussion protocol, if he is out yet again, then Tony Pollard is probably going to actually be up higher in my rankings, but I still feel really good about him, even if Tajay Spears is playing, because Washington is not a good run defense. They've allowed the second most rushing yards per game to the running back position this year, so Tony Pollard in a really, really good spot this week. Ramondre Stevenson is my RB21 on the week. He is facing the 22nd ranked Indianapolis Colts defense against adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position, and they are actually allowing the 5th most rushing yards per game to the running back position as well. Stevenson had really weird usage in week 12. We saw his usage spike down to 40% of the snaps after 4 weeks of over 70%. The game got kind of out of hand with Miami. I think that's pretty much what happened here, and they turned to their 2-minute drill, third down back in Antonio Gibson for the majority of the game because the Dolphins were just wiping the floor with the Patriots. I wouldn't really be worried about the down performance because in this game against the Colts, they're at home in this one. I don't think it's going to get out of hand. It's probably going to be a close game, come down to the wire. Maybe the Colts win the game, but I think that Stevenson and the Patriots should be in it the whole time. So I feel pretty good that Ramondre Stevenson is in for a bounce-back game after having just a measly 1.3 fantasy point performance last week. I still feel like he's a pretty good play this week. Running back 22 for me was Tyrone Tracy, who locked into my lineup versus the Dallas Cowboys. They were 28th ranked against the run coming in to that game. He played Thanksgiving afternoon. I did have some concerns about the Giants' offense versus a now a lot healthier Cowboys defense with Micah Parsons back and all those guys, and it kind of looked like the right call, to be honest, because the Giants couldn't do anything clicking on offense. He had a decent day. Tyrone Tracy posted 14.5 PPR points because he found the end zone, but had he not found the end zone, he probably wouldn't have had a very good game and an overall forgettable afternoon of Giants football. So I had Tyrone Tracy at 22. That's where he locked in for me. That's about the range that I think factored in what his workload is and how good he's been versus the risk of the Giants offense, and also the fact that the Cowboys defense, even though they were ranked 28th against the run coming in, they were playing a lot better on defense. So running back 23 for me is James Conner going up against the second-ranked Minnesota Vikings. In Week 12, James Conner regained back some of his workload because we saw in Week 9 and Week 10, he was kind of in and out of the lineup. We saw Trey Benson working in a little bit more, but even despite last week where Trey Benson was still getting 30% of the rushing attempts, James Conner did, bounce back from a snap share perspective, but the Vikings are a horse of a run defense. You do not want to run against this team. 62 rushing yards per game allowed, which only Kansas City and Baltimore have been better against fantasy running backs, and especially given the way that the Cardinals run their offense and their offensive line kind of sometimes has these bad games. I don't really love the matchup of Brian Flores going up against the Arizona Cardinals. The Vikings do allow the 8th most targets per game to the running back position, so maybe James Conner can get you there from a passing perspective. Maybe he can catch a couple passes in this game, but I can't imagine this is like a vintage 100-yard rushing, 2 rushing touchdown James Conner game. I'd be pretty surprised if he posted a really, really good performance in this one. So keep that in mind. If you do have better options, James Conner, I don't think by any means a must start this week. Running back 24 for me, and honestly, I might move him over James Conner, is Brian Robinson versus the Tennessee Titans. He is officially not listed on the final injury report. I feel pretty good about him this week with no Austin Eckler, who is going to miss the game with a concussion. We have not seen that this season. We've seen Eckler be out there with no B-Rob, but we have not seen B-Rob be out there with no Eckler. So I could see a bigger workload for Brian Robinson coming up here. I think in an alternate universe where Brian Robinson never starts getting banged up, I think around week 5, week 6, he started dealing with a knee injury, then he had a hamstring injury, now he has another knee injury. If he had stayed healthy for the most part all season, I think we could be talking about a guy who was like Chuba Hubbard, maybe even better from like a fantasy perspective all season long, because if you look at when Brian Robinson went down, it kind of coincides with like the fall off of this Commanders offense where, the last 4 or 5 games or so, we haven't really seen them perform at the level that they did for like the first month of the season, first month and a half of the season. So I don't really love that for the Commanders, but I do like the fact that Brian Robinson appears to be a little bit healthier. And like I said, I think he should get a better workload this week than we've seen from him really all season because Austin Eckler is going to be out of the lineup. So maybe we see B-Rob get a little bit more receiving work. Maybe we see him, snap share wise up near the 60-70% range. So just keep that in mind. If you do have Brian Robinson, I think he's a great play this week. Running back 25 for me is Nick Chubb versus the Denver Broncos, 14th ranked against the run. Nick Chubb got a positive game script for the Browns for the first time since he's been back. On Thursday Night Football, they played against the Steelers. It was a snow game, and the Browns actually ended up winning that game, so he took full advantage of that, posting a top 7 week, scored 2 touchdowns, actually looked a little bit more like the Nick Chubb of old. And if we see this again, or if we see him just playing a lot better, that's a good sign for Nick Chubb down the stretch, because I talked about him like way back a couple weeks ago as a good trade target because he had a half-decent schedule for the run. He's Nick Chubb, so we know he's a good running back when healthy, but we just needed to see him kind of ramp up and play better. And regardless, I still think he's going to be a fine flex play start going forward. But against a top 15 run defense in the Broncos, if we see him have a dud in this one, it's probably more likely he's like a matchup-dependent RB3 at this point. But if Nick Chubb looks like Nick Chubb in this one, he has a good performance against a really good run defense, and this game stays close, then he's going to be a fixture of like RB2 range going forward with Nick Chubb. So I feel pretty good about that. Running back 26 for me is Gus Edwards versus the Atlanta Falcons. They are 10th ranked against the run, so it's a pretty tough matchup for Gus Edwards, but we don't have J.K. Dobbins in this game. It's a 48-point over-under game. Gus Edwards scoring a touchdown or multiple touchdowns in this one is probably how he pays off. I don't really think he's all that good at this point in his career, and the Falcons, like I said, are a top 10 run defense, but the Chargers are favored by like 2.5 points, as opposed to getting boat raced last week by the Baltimore Ravens in the second half of that game. J.K. Dobbins was in the game when it was close. Once J.K. Dobbins got injured, it was Gus Edwards as the lead back, but by that point, the Chargers were already down like 10 points or whatever, so we didn't really get to see how this backfield would look in a neutral game script with Gus Edwards on the field as the lead back there. So I do think that's what we're going to see this week. I think that the Falcons and Chargers are pretty evenly matched teams. They'll probably go down to the wire in a potentially high-scoring game, so I like Gus Edwards to probably punch it in this week. Running back 27 for me was Rico Dowdle, who locked into my lineup. In hindsight, I probably should have had him higher because the Giants Giants were 24th against the run coming into this game. They've kind of given up on their coach, given up on their season. I would say most of the guys that locked into my lineup, I kind of nailed where they should have been, but the exception is Rico Dowdle, because I think I was too low on him. Danny had him more in like the early 20s. That's probably where I should have had him coming into the week. I knew the Cowboys were going to take care of this game. I said it on our live stream that I thought Cowboys -3.5 was like a free cash bet. And I don't trust the Cowboys. That's why I had Rico Dowdle at RB27, but I still feel pretty good that he ended up hitting. Obviously, he had a 21.3 point performance, so he's going to end up being like a top 10 running back on the week. So you got a great spike week out of Rico Dowdle if you played him. Running back 28 for me is Rachaad White versus the Carolina Panthers. Again, they are 32nd against the run, like I talked about with Bucky Irving. But just because Bucky Irving is an excellent play and he's kind of like now the starter / the more valuable back in this backfield, this is, I believe, the first week I've ever ranked Bucky Irving over Rachaad White all season. It doesn't mean Rachaad isn't still a good option, because he's been consistent all year at getting targets. He's been over 10 PPR points in 7 games out of 10 so far, and that's been despite Bucky Irving being pretty solid all year. This matchup is just so juicy for fantasy running backs that I think both of these guys can have top 24 weeks, and Carolina is definitely proving to be better at this point this year versus, earlier in the season. I think the Bucs can handle their business in this one, even though the Carolina Panthers might keep this one a little closer than it would have been had these teams played in week 4. I still think that Rachaad White and Bucky Irving are going to do a lot of damage to that Carolina run defense. Running back 29 for me is DeAndre Swift. He locked into my lineup versus the Lions. Had the right read here. I buried him in my rankings because the Lions have been shutting down better running backs than DeAndre Swift all season long. So he locked in all the way down at 29, and he posted a dud with sub 10 PPR points. So I felt good about him as a sit this week. That ended up aging pretty well. Running back 30 for me is Najee Harris versus the Cincinnati Bengals 8th ranked run defense. Jaylen Warren took a big bite out of Najee Harris's workload on Thursday night in the snow game. It was a great game script for the run, and Najee just put up a dud. Honestly, I don't really know why he didn't have a great game in that game environment after being pretty consistent for like 5 to 6 games before that. Najee Harris was consistently like a 15 PPR point per game guy since like week 4 or whatever, when Jaylen Warren started dealing with injury. We'll have to see if that trend continues, because maybe Warren is now healthy and he's going to consistently be a pest for Najee Harris. He's actually been an RB2 in 3 straight games. He was RB20 in week 10, RB22 in week 11, and then RB10 last week on Thursday night, like I said. So we'll see how this backfield shakes out going forward, but I don't really love what has taken place for Najee Harris, at least in the last couple of weeks. So getting into the final 6 guys of this video, the deep league flex plays. Again, because there's no buys, there's guys in this range that usually wouldn't be. For starters, being Travis Etienne, running back 31 for me on the week. The Texans are 4th against the run, so that's partially why he's down here. But I do think that Travis Etienne has like a sneaky chance to be like a league winner down the stretch, at least from like a best ball perspective, because he was hard to advance because he was such an early pick and he's been such a bust. But if you can get him through, I do think he could end up being a really good option, because Trevor Lawrence is likely to be back this week and maybe back healthy going forward. And the bye maybe was crucial for Travis Etienne getting healthier. So Tank Bigsby is expected to play in this game. We'll have to wait and see how the workload, shakes out between those two guys. But the schedule after this week is actually pretty easy for ETN down the stretch. So I do think he has a chance to end up being pretty solid for the rest of the season. RB 32 and 33 locked into my lineup. That was Amir Abdullah and Kareem Hunt. Amir Abdullah, 8.05 PPR points. He did return a punt for 68 yards. And he was tackled eventually. But that doesn't count for anything in fantasy land, unfortunately. So not a great game from Amir Abdullah, but it was a really difficult matchup. So I had him buried down here, even despite Madison and Zamir White being out, and we knew Amir Abdullah would be like the lead back, and I still buried him down at RB32 because I didn't like the matchup. RB33, I feel really good about not starting Kareem Hunt, because a lot of people probably would have. 30th ranked defense were the Las Vegas Raiders, and I was worried about Isaiah Pacheco, so I didn't start Kareem Hunt or Isaiah Pacheco anywhere. And 3.5 PPR points, Kareem Hunt. I actually nailed my my pick'em slate. One of my picks yesterday was that Kareem Hunt would go below his rushing yards because I didn't like the matchup there. Running back 34, Javonte Williams for me. He's just been consistently inconsistent. Probably one of the more frustrating running backs to roster in fantasy. It's a tough matchup, definitely by no means a must play. But if you want to play Javonte Williams because you like the workload or whatever, I don't think it's terrible. I think the game script will be good for him. But the Cleveland Browns are pretty good against stopping the run, and they are a lot worse at stopping the pass, so that's just something to keep in mind there. Running back 35 for me is Braylon Allen, who I talked about already, has a better matchup normally than what we've seen from the Jets backfield. I do think that Breece Hall might be limited to some degree, maybe 10-15% of the snaps that usually go to Breece go to Braylon. So I think that makes him like a fine low-end flex play if you guys are looking for like 8 to 15 PPR points. I think that's probably the range of outcomes for Braylon Allen. And then RB36 for me is Jaylen Warren. And now that I think about it, I probably should have Warren ahead of Braylon Allen, given the workload split that we've seen from Warren versus Najee the last couple of weeks, and maybe even should have Warren a couple spots higher than this. But that is the end of my top 36. Hopefully you guys got some value. Hopefully I set your fantasy football lineups or helped you set your fantasy football lineups for you. If you got some value from this video, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new around here. We're going to have tons of content even into the dead times of year. We talk fantasy football prospects, dynasty fantasy football, all that good stuff. So if you guys are new around here, hit the subscribe button down below. If you want to check out all of our bonus content, rest of season rankings, dynasty rankings, trade value charts, tons of new stuff coming to flockfantasy.com. We will have, rookie draft guides out very soon. I know the domain guys have posted theirs already. If you guys want to learn about the 2025 class, head on over to flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up for 7 days for free, 30% off any of the packages, 6 months for free when you sign up annually. We will potentially be having a new surprise, annual sign up bonus for you guys that use our promo code as well. So stay tuned for that. That'll be coming probably early in the off season. So definitely check out all that stuff if you want to tail the pick'em entry that we built out today. Again, it was Aaron Jones, Jonathan Taylor, and Bucky Irving. If you guys want to tail that one, head on over to the link down below in the pinned comment. Promo code FSE over on Underdog Fantasy gets you up to 1,000 in bonus cash, gets you a free pick'em to add into this entry as well. So if you guys are interested in that, if you're interested in tailing your our picks here, I hit a 6X on yesterday's Friday night slate or Friday afternoon slate. So definitely a little bit hot right now on the pick'ems, but if you guys want to tail that, like I said, link down below in the pinned comment. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.